So if you would please, Governor Hickenlooper, please tell us why you are running for Colorado Senate, and if you could explain a little bit about your campaign.
Sure. Well, and thank you for taking time out to let me visit for a bit. Obviously, the path of cannabis reform went right through Colorado, and with the support of the activist community, we created, I think, we argue it's the gold standard for regulation. We prioritize the safety of kids. We did not see an uptick of teenage consumption. We worked to try and end illicit markets. We focused on entrepreneurs and jobs. At one point when we thought we had a big black market, we lowered the tax rate. Obviously, I know there's an elephant in the room. That is a couple of the vetoes we did my last year. I understand that there's a level of frustration that we created. I think our communication certainly could have been better. I'm happy to answer any questions about those vetoes. I realize that while not always seeing exactly eye to eye, I think we shared the value, the vision of trying to make a regulatory framework that would push back on any attacks that this was a threat to society. And I think, once we proved that there wasn't a growth in teenage consumption, we took away the arguments that you shouldn't deschedule it and that we shouldn't decriminalize it. Obviously, reforming the tax code as well, so that we treat cannabis like any other business in Colorado. I support the SAFE Act to make sure we clear federal hurdles. That's obviously never going to happen with Mitch McConnell in the majority chair for all these bills. I guess what the thing I want to leave you with, and then we can answer questions, probably more useful for you. My door will always be open. I'm one of those kids when you probably never, I wrote I don't know whether you call it a biography or a memoir or whatever, but I wrote a book about my strange life. But when my older brother, who's 7 years older, when I went to his college graduation, and I was a social outcast in school, and he, I didn't know the difference between marijuana and like heavy drugs, and he, after the graduation ceremony of him for college, so I was I was 17 or 16, I guess 17, but I got high, and there was, I don't know, it changed my life in ways that had more to do with social acceptance than the actual narcotic effects of the drug. But it allowed me, both in terms of my life, in terms of music. I got, in a funny way, got to know musicians in different ways over the years. Anyway, it's a pathway. If you were to look at my pathway through marijuana, it's probably pretty typical for an awful lot of people of my generation, right? I was born in 1952. Anyway, let me just say again, reiterate that if I get elected, which I intend to do, my door will always be open, and I am, absolutely committed to, making sure that the safe, legal marijuana is available, in every state. It's decriminalized from a national basis, and that we have that, we stop sending so many kids to prison.
Well, as the Colorado chapter of NORML, the national branch represents over 100,000 cannabis consumers. So we just want to assure our supporters have someone who values their opinions, their views, and their needs. So with elections right around the corner, our organization would like to hear your stance on some cannabis policy. So I just want to go over just a few questions with you, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
So if you win, how will you support cannabis patients and consumers in the Senate?
Well, and I think that's a good entree to music. uh, when I did Hickelooper, which was a fundraiser we did few weeks ago, the first person we talked to was Willie Nelson. And I'd met his wife because she wanted to get in the business back when we first legalized it in Colorado. And so she and one of her kids came in and saw me, and we spent an hour. And I just laid out, that I was like, my ex-wife was a Quaker, or is a Quaker. And Quakers have a thing called a fair witness. Fair witness is somebody who doesn't have a profit, a self-interest in a negotiation or an issue. And I said I wanted to be the fair witness for marijuana. I wanted to be the person that created a set of regulatory, constraints that we could regulate it fairly, and no one could come and say we favored one side or the other, so that if we were successful, no one could attack us and say that the deck was stacked against their side or the other side. And so when Willie Nelson and Willie Nelson's wife and her son came in, and we had this long conversation, we just established a relationship. And so one of the local promoters called Willie up and said, "Hey, would you be willing to do Hickelooper?" So next thing I know, I was talking to Willie Nelson's manager, who's been his manager since 1973. Think about that, the same guy. And I said, I'd just seen Willie 4 years before at Red Rocks, and here he was, 80, I think at that time he was 80 years old or 81, and he's one of the few musicians at that age who didn't use a teleprompter. He still remembered the lyrics of every song he sang, as close as I could tell. And I said, and he's famous for getting high every single day. And his manager said, well, you got to understand, he doesn't get high to get high, right? He's had his whole life real issues with depression, with anxiety, and he's self-medicated with alcohol. And that's why he couldn't keep a band together. That's why he went through a couple wives. And he made a decision, I think it was what he said 45 years ago, or 40 years ago, that he was going to use marijuana, but not smoke a lot, but just smoke enough so that he was positive, that he was an optimist. And it was the best story I've heard of the potential that's out there for so many people, different than what the public thinks, right? The public thinks that everyone's just going out and they're either going to have craft beer or they're going to smoke a couple doobies and have a recreational event. Whereas I think it's quite possible that we'll end up with a large number of people that use this just like so many people do with alcohol, as a way to deal with the stress and the pressure of life. So I guess I look at it that I see making sure that there's access to those people where they find benefit to marijuana, that shouldn't be criminalized.
Patients that are using this to as a tool in the toolbox to coexist with mental health ailments that they're suffering from, to establish a better quality of life. And that's very cool to know about Willie Nelson. Thank you for sharing.
You bet.
What do you think federal legalization looks like, and how will it impact already well-established regulatory programs like Colorado?
Well, I think the best, and again, there could be some differences, but I think the best template is what happened with alcohol. And I realize that's not popular with everybody in the marijuana industry, but it's a template that people can understand and get their arms around it very quickly. And, if you drive from Denver down to Dallas, you're going to go through a couple counties in Oklahoma that you can't buy liquor in. And you're going to go through a couple counties in Texas where you can't buy liquor. And everyone seems to adjust. But every state gets to kind of decide their regulations. And, when you think about it, there's not that much that has to happen to get us to that place. We've got to decriminalize it on the federal level. We've got to deschedule it. And for a couple of years, I kept looking at how would we reschedule it? And obviously that's not the right solution. The right solution is to deschedule it so that it can function like alcohol and have those same expectations and limitations. The same, I think what we're going to evolve to very rapidly, and I think it's going to happen pretty quickly on the national level, especially if Democrats, I can't guarantee this, but I think if Democrats take the Senate with a healthy majority, that we can find the Republicans in the Senate that will help us, move rapidly in this direction. I think the FDA should be able to do research. It's another music analogy, but the bass player for the Avett Brothers, one of the best rock and roll bands out there right now, in my opinion. But his daughter, Hallie, had brain cancer when she was 20 months old, and they could not stop her seizures until they used cannabinoid, and it was the single thing that would work. And yet, they had to come out into Colorado to get what they needed for their daughter. And as he said, we sell out Red Rocks 4 days in a row, but we only do it once a year. And I think, it's long overdue as a Schedule I narcotic. No one could do any testing on it. The FDA couldn't test it. So we don't have those studies to see exactly whether you're talking about seizures and brain cancer of various forms, or you're talking about autism or all manner of issues. We should have real longitudinal studies that can actually help us describe and understand maximum benefit. So those are the obvious things: banking, research, decriminalizing, and again, that I guess it's relatively straightforward but somewhat complex legislation that's in place that helps delineate exactly what states' rights are in terms of alcohol. And I think, there are going to be a couple of things where they don't overlap perfectly, but I think it's a pretty good template to start. Normalize, and I'm not trying to pander to your name, but I'm just saying, once you normalize marijuana so that the public becomes more accepted that this is reasonable, I think that the amount of resources that will go into research people will be shocked, because I think there is that vast potential. There's all, as you say, people have been using marijuana, and so there's all these stories and anecdotes and studies that are so compelling. But outside of Israel, there's some other longitudinal studies. There's not one.
Oops.
Oh no, did we lose him?
I think we lost him. I was going to interject a very quick question,
Just
Ashley.
a phone call. He might be back.
So
There you are.
So I'm on my iPad. So when a call comes in, you guys get shut out. And that was actually a guy who runs a thing called the Summit. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they are big supporters of the normalization of marijuana. So anyway, but I told him I just sent him you can touch a little thing on the screen that says, I can't talk now.
I can't.
Okay. Governor, I just wanted to just ask a couple of very quick things. One, obviously you understand the importance of commerce. Although NORML protects patients and consumers, we also want to make sure that there is a business-friendly climate, but there's also an interplay between who gets to be a part of the industry, make a living off it, and because of racial justice concerns aren't able to. I also wanted to address, as homebrew was not legal to make till 78, I'm gonna have homebrewed in the past myself. I want to see what you will do to make sure that when cannabis is descheduled, that you'll have it where people can grow their own cannabis at the privacy of their own home. So I appreciate your thoughts on those things.
No, so again, I have no problem with that. Again, that's a function as people become more adjusted to this new world. For many people, it's still, especially the older generation, it's still disorienting. But I think two issues. One, this notion that if someone has a felony, that they can't operate a retail marijuana thing. I think that's a relic of the past, and certainly what Jared Polis is doing here, what we did, or what we thought we had done, but not successfully, by basically giving clemency to everyone who had been convicted of a nonviolent a possession crime. We obviously didn't get to everybody or all that we should have. But I think that's, right now, it's also a question of the access to capital. I mean, here we are having sent how many hundreds of thousands, millions of mostly kids, and mostly kids of color, to jail and made them felons, and now suddenly they can't participate in now what's becoming a lucrative industry, and I think that's unacceptable. And I have already talked to places where we could begin to look at finding access to capital, and I think governors like Jared Polis are once we deal with the law at the federal level and decriminalize it and take away, provide some level of amnesty, or not amnesty, but clemency, then I think we can, each state is going to be able to do the same thing. And I think there'll be a pent up demand for that. I think the home growing is fine. You have to be, as we've learned in Colorado, there are people that are going to abuse that system, just like there were people that wanted to abuse home brewing. That was the fear. No one's going to abuse home brewing, and certainly someone who had, when I first opened the Wine Coop Brewing Company back in 1988, if you had a drunk driving conviction, you couldn't open a brewery. You couldn't get a brew pub license, right? That's changed. And I think that's obviously got to change for marijuana as well. That's what they should be looking after is gangsters and organized crime. And it's not hard to write legislation that separates those people from those who had convictions for, possession of marijuana.
And thanks for the thoughts.
All right, another question was, did you vote for Amendment 64? Now, I know you were governor when Amendment 64 was implemented, but the question is, did you vote for A64?
So, and that's a question that I unfortunately have to take to my grave, because as the governor, and with so much risk about teenage consumption, I actively preached against 64. I just thought that I wanted to have more states doing it at once, and I really wanted to see a couple of trials, not a whole state do it at once. But that being said, when it passed, I was very committed to the fact that we had to create a fair system and give it every chance of success without stacking the deck against it. And if I'd come out in favor of it and been a big lobbyist in support of the bill, I think that would have been much harder to have me be a credible, fair witness, which is what a lot of conservative people looked at this. And when I started saying, hey, we don't see any, we do a study of kids' health every 2 years where we talk to 24,000 kids, and we don't see any increase in the number of kids getting high or how often they're getting high. This is what we were worried about, and it's not happening. When I said that, as someone who originally opposed it, I had real credibility. If I'd been a supporter from the very beginning, I'm not sure I would have had the same credibility. And I think that's where, as the governor, when you're taking on a controversial initiative like that, sometimes you have to be arm's length.
That issue, and like it or not like it, you still implemented a plan, stuck to it, and Colorado has set an example for many other states, and we really appreciate that. So thank you.
You bet. I'm proud. I think we are considered the gold standard right now in most other states. Can't tell you how many governors I've talked to about how we went about it and how they might think about it. And Andrew Friedman, who was, our staff person, who he looked like he was about 19 years old, but he actually had gone to Harvard Law School. So he was a good lawyer. And, he's the one who helped make sure that those regulations were fair and objective, and there wouldn't be a bunch of red tape and kind of hidden entanglements to try and set people up to fail. It was really set up as to try to be the leanest, cleanest, fairest system of regulations. And he's gone and helped probably a dozen other states set up their regulatory frameworks based on what we learned here.
The question would be, what are the general goals you wish to accomplish with the position in which you will hold? So
you're talking about just relative to marijuana, or you mean overall?
Overall, in the Senate, what are your goals?
Well, I've said, since I was in high school, I said that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. I helped a friend start a community health center in Middletown, Connecticut in 1973 that now has 220 locations. And I think this is the time. I think we can do a sliding scale public option and fairly quickly get to universal coverage. And that's going to, you know, there's going to be a lot of evolution in there. But I think that we can move much more quickly than people think. Obviously, climate change and our environment in Colorado. Look at the fires that we had this last week in Boulder County. We're out of time, and we have to move aggressively there as well. But obviously, the highest priority, front and center, is going to be COVID-19 and the pandemic. You know, dealing with that. So those are kind of the big things. But within that, you know, within that bigger canvas, I think reasonable gun safety legislation, get universal background checks around the country. Look at how do we deschedule marijuana and make sure that we get the, you know, I know Kamala Harris has a bill that would allow a lot of what I'm talking about to become federal law. I would be, you know, in support of those initiatives, even as we're doing these, you know, climate change and COVID-19, these big, you know, the big challenges.
So you kind of answered two questions that we had. And one would be for gun rights. Now, how would you answer the question in support of veterans, gun rights, and those who are cannabis patients? We're not allowed, if you're a cannabis patient, you're not allowed to have a gun. So
Right.
how would you go about that?
So I'd have to talk to medical professionals. I don't understand that. I know that there were issues around veterans groups and some of the anti suicide regulations that were put in place. And again, I don't know enough details. I am alarmed by the number of veterans that are taking their lives. I don't think anyone, when you see the curve and how steep it is, I don't think anyone can turn away and not be shocked. But I also think that, oh, that's a cat.
That's Jumper.
I didn't know what that was. I thought it was like a wool coat someone threw on your lap.
It's Jumper. Sorry about that.
Anyway, I don't, you know, I respect the Second Amendment. You know, I've got guns in my house. Was always a bird hunter. I think that's something I think the veteran community and the medical professionals should help us decide what the best thing is there. You know, I'll tell you something that's every bit as scary, if not more scary, when you look at the number of military veterans who are taking their own lives, is to see how many farmers and ranchers are taking their own lives now. And similar issues.
Sure.
You know, our country is not doing what it needs to do in terms of taking care of people that have gone through trauma and stress, and they have issues around their mental health. We're not delivering. And again, a golden place where marijuana might be a significant part of the solution.
I agree, Governor, and I would invite you to consider some form of single payer that would include a component of mental health care to make sure that people don't die because of lack of ability to have health care, and that is driven by, you know, the medical needs of patients and not driven by insurance companies. So I invite you to consider that, and I appreciate your concern about, you know, veterans and farmers, because it is very alarming. We also invite you to talk to the experts and see how we can have responsible gun ownership and use cannabis as a medicine.
Right.
I just wanted to say thank you for your consideration, understanding of what we suffer from as veterans in relation to gun control and safe gun access. My reason for that question is so many veterans are not enjoying or accessing the benefits of the medical marijuana program both here and federally because they do not want to give up their gun rights. So they're denying themselves even in a state that has access because of that very fact alone. And they're scared. They're scared to lose their benefits, among other things. But yeah, I believe we can find a way to coexist the balance between gun safety, mental health, and mental fitness. Thanks.
Well, it's the same thing, the same bias we see against domestic violence, that people think that, marijuana is going to do the same things to domestic violence that alcohol does. And obviously that's just not true, right? It's just not true. And we just have to make sure we have get some medical information in a distilled fashion and make that point.
Would you support the MORE Act in the Senate?
And that's Kamala Harris's.
That's Kamala
Senator
Harris's MORE Act,
yeah.
and you seem really patient driven. And the MORE Act actually it legalizes medical marijuana on a federal level and gives 5% excise tax in between the cultivator and the manufacturer. And so this doesn't fall on patients. This does so much, giving the Safe Banking Act. It has that and so much more. So would that be something that you would put your name on and support? We believe we have enough votes in the House, but we would need your support in the Senate.
Again, I'd have to read it to formally clean it, but from what you described and one of my staff has read it and said, yeah, you shouldn't have anything to worry. That's something you should be able to support. I love my staff. I trust them, but I want to read things first. But certainly everything that I said about the MORE Act, and I don't know, have you read it, Shad? And you say it's okay, right?
I said it's okay.
Yeah. So I think it's, let's say it's it's highly probable that I will support it.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank you for your time, and just wanted to ask if perhaps at a later date, if you would be able to be available for a Q&A with some of the cannabis community on another Zoom call.
Sure, although between now and the election, I'm not sure we'll get to it there, but certainly I'd love to do a town hall meeting around cannabis after the election. I'd be more than happy to do that. I'm one of those guys, my door's always open. I've already taken the pledge to do 4 town hall meetings a year, so we'll make sure that happens.
And you addressed the question in regards to the autism and the vetoed bill, and that was reason in your last year of governor because.
Well, the medical professionals that we had thought we needed another year or 2 years. They weren't sure, but they felt if you're gonna tell the public that this is a medicine, you have a certain bare minimum of what the Department of Public Health has to do, or else everyone's going to have something that they want to be able to classify as a prescription drug, as something that would be specifically approved by the authorities, the quote unquote authorities. So again, we didn't do a very good job of communicating it, but I have, without question, seen firsthand the beneficial effects on so many people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time.
Thank you for all of your support and all the work you guys are doing. I know that you're actually in the trenches and you've been a big part of moving public awareness in the right direction. So thank you for your efforts as well.